Hey, greeting in Niakoma. It's Montsho Nwasha. Helping to simplify love for Blacks in leadership. We want to talk quickly about the season that is upon us in the Black Love School. If you follow us in the Black Love School, you know that we move in the seasons. In the fall, it is the harvest of love, where we deal with friends, family, and the intimate relationship. In the winter, it is the culture of love, where we deal with the high spiritual science of indigenous Black culture and the intimate relationship. In the spring, which we've just completed, is the Spring into Love, where we deal with new relationships and how to bring new energies and establish one. But now we're in the summer. I think probably our most popular
It's
semester.
where we started, I think.
Yeah. And it's called The Heat of Love. Now, the focus here is intimacy and sex, the emotional vulnerability that creates intimacy, and then an introduction into a revelation for a lot of us, which is the indigenous understanding of physical mating, copulation, and sexuality, all different dynamics. So we have so many classes. We kicked it off last night with the rituals of lovemaking. We had a riveting conversation about the methodology and rituals of lovemaking, but we have an amazing lineup coming this summer, and this semester is filled with a lot of jewels. So what would you say, Nwasha?
Well, we'll be diving deep into the 7 senses of sex. So in indigenous culture, there are 7 senses, and we start with thought and emotion as 2 senses. So the senses are what helps you interpret the world, your environment, know what's happening. A lot of times when we're only taught about the 5 physical senses, which are sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And I think that, of course, all of that's involved in intimacy and sex. And what's always important is that the first 2, there really is an order to what's most important, and there's an order to, what happens first. Thought is the first sense. Emotion is the second sense. And we take that into our, material and physical experience. So that's a very important class, because as we're making our intimate spaces, and as we want to make sure that we still maintain passion, desire, interest, excitement, variety, and that we are safe, comfortable, fulfilled in sex, we need to be able to know how to have the polarity of the range in all of the senses. So we're going deep into that one.
We're going into that one.
Potentially focusing on one of the senses. So we have the 7 senses of sex as a class. And we also have several other classes that explore those senses in a deeper way.
Like the touch class.
So yes, the 7 senses of sex, but then the art and science of touch is one of the classes that kind of branches off from the 7 senses of sex, because touch is the most important sense. Without it, we would be numb. We wouldn't be able to walk around, right? We wouldn't be able to feel hot and cold. So it's the important sense for survival, but it's also, I think, what we recognize as a way of exciting erogenous zones and even connection. So there are lines about touch when it comes to intimacy. You don't touch people in certain places, right? If you're not intimate with them, ideally, right? In a in a peaceful culture,
right,
that's respectful, you wouldn't do that.
Right.
You also don't touch people typically, even if you are familiar with them, in certain places in front of other people, right? So touch is a very interesting language. All the senses, I think, have a language quality to them, because we recognize their vibration when we're talking about the polarity of depriving a sense for intimacy, like maybe wearing blindfolds or being silent, and then, really diving deeper into expressing the sense. So having, different color lights or full lights on as opposed to the blindfold, or saying a whole bunch of sounds, right? So we do a lot of things subconsciously and, through instinct. And there also is a method behind sound, touch, sight, and what it actually does to excite us or to calm us down. So what we talked about last night, as Montsho said, was, therapeutic lovemaking as a somatic practice and ritualizing that. And what we're going into is, sex talk, so this is the before, during, and after. How to talk about sex and how to, amazingly, sometimes people have sex and they don't actually talk about it. They don't talk about it beforehand and it kind of happens. They don't talk during, or what they say during is disconnected from their actual relationship. And then we don't debrief about how it was or what we'd like to explore. And I think this happens more often in a longer term relationship, ironically, because you might be taking for granted how the beginnings were, or you might be taking for granted that you didn't know you would change or your partner would change. And those are new conversations with old, ties and well-rooted love, ideally. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into how to talk about what you want and how to talk about how you're changing as you develop, and your hormones change and your responsibilities change and what you look for in sex could change. And then we're also going to talk about sex diets, which is extremely important, how to be healthy. So we talked about therapeutic lovemaking and what positions and power poses you can do to enhance your relationship, enhance yourself, and enhance your partner. But there is an overall aspect to your health, right? So you can eat better. You can eat differently. You can eat before sex, what you should eat after sex, right? To rejuvenate yourself after sharing
and replenish, especially for the men. Replenish. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had a great conversation last night with the community, both couples and singles, and really just sharing what people understand about the rituals of lovemaking, the methods of lovemaking. But as Nwasha said, we have a litany of classes in this semester that will be exploring and that will be available to you if you should choose to join the Black Love School and really get deeper into the art and science of Black love culture. We have the promiscuity paradox. We have a class called oral anal masturbation and the endless fetishes of a pornographic nation, where we explore some of the kinkier things that we're into and really understand where they come from culturally and juxtapose them with the value systems of Ma'at to see if this is behavior that is really elevating us. A lot of us use it, but what is it really producing, right? And so we have, what else do we have? We have the
orgasm.
The class on the orgasm, which is such a revelation for most of us because we have never been taught about the indigenous Black experience or understanding about sexuality. And so we don't realize that many of the things that we've learned from an oppressive system. So it's a real paradigmal shift to really understand sexuality from an indigenous perspective. And of course, underlying our belief system is the idea that our ancestors never really brought anything of value, or they weren't progressive or highly involved, when in fact the opposite is the truth. They are the highest level. So we learn things like the orgasm is not an ejaculation or an ejaculation, but it is the simultaneous climax of a man and a woman. And that totally changes the game because most of us have never experienced that one time, let alone for as much as we're indulging in sex. And, you said sex diets, you said the 7 senses of touch, ritual love making. What else is in there? I'm trying to think of some of the popular classes that are in there off the top of my head. We've been running
sacred sex symbolism.
Yeah, sacred sex symbolism is a great class, so you can understand the imagery that we're receiving on a subliminal level. That's really programming us to be obsessed, really, with sexuality.
But also, I think this is a time where people are reflecting. We learn in a different way. There's a lot of, I think, visual learning happening with video and the way we can socially share. So even when you look back at sacred texts on sex, there's a lot of there are a lot of paintings, a lot of art, a lot of instruction on how to have sex, but sometimes it's misinterpreted in this time.
Right.
So when you look at things, whether it's from Kemetic culture, classical African culture, whether it's from, East Asian, South Asian culture, sometimes the way that we are interpreting things is incorrect because it's outside of a cultural context. So it's really important to look at sacred sexual symbolism and understand it through the culture that it was coming through. So the purpose of it, what certain colors or positions actually meant, versus how we sometimes distort things in this time to match a cultural view that is modern, or what we're presently experiencing. And I think that this happens a lot when you look at anything cultural and anything older. We kind of we have a lens of the culture that we're learning from, which is not an original culture. So how we interpret the way that people were eating, the way that people were talking, the way that people expressed, their connection with the divine. It depends on who you get that message from, whether or not you'll be told that it was supreme or was savage.
Right.
And so for us, when we see a random glyph or an item, a position from an ancient text, we have to make sure that we're aiming to understand it in context as best as we can, because you can't absorb, as much as we love micro content right now in our modern American culture, you can't necessarily absorb everything in 3 minutes.
The profundity of our legacy is so awesome. You could never, absorb it in just the length of time that social media has been available. Or the internet, the last 20, 30 years. You're talking about thousands of years of symbolic and cultural wisdom, symptomatic
reframing
and symbolic thought. So
that you can do. It only takes a couple seconds to have your world change from reframing. And we typically know that in trauma. Right. But one of the purposes of the Black Love School is to get the relationship education that we were never given. So we were never given the cultural context around sex, around intimacy, around love. So it's important to have that reframe. You're not going to learn everything. Even in the Black Love School, classes are the on-demand classes are between 30 minutes to, maybe 70, 80, 90 minutes at the longest. Right. And these are all still ways for you to get introduced to something and to have your heart work, which is your practice. Your practice is going to evolve your skill set. So just being introduced to something from the micro to the longer form content is not enough to change your life. You have to be able to practice. And so coming together in community and committing to the practice and sharing, how things go for you, right? Like what's working and what needs to change. That's the most important thing, I think, is when you look at, sacred sex symbolism, learning a few things reframes your understanding so that anything else you learn is filtered through your paradigm, and if that can be the thing that you walk away from, if you learn the context of 3, to 5 different sacred sex symbols, what that does is open your mind and create a shift where you center yourself and you center Black people, and most importantly, you decenter, oppressive culture. So there's a lot of this is probably a whole nother video. There's a lot of challenge when it comes to Black people having sex, loving each other, creating children, holding their families in a certain space, because if we do that, then that is, the thing that shakes racism, white supremacy, or uproots its stronghold on us and all the other people of the world. So there's a lot of negative connotations to us getting along from a systemic perspective.
Yeah, a natural perspective. And, you know, we do have a class in the semester called Surpassing Sexual Trauma. Mm-hmm. And this is visual sexual trauma, also rape, molestation, and many of the things that we go through. So, you know, as healers, as therapists, as clinicians, we definitely want to be responsible. So throughout the whole semester, we're really moving and going deep into the, no pun intended, we're going deep into the sexual paradigm of relationships, but we always keep a high moral ethical standard. And we're really trying to elevate our people through to a cultural, spiritual high ground through sexual activity. So if you're looking for greater sex knowledge, if you're looking for methodology and techniques that are going to cleanse and elevate you internally and externally, if you're looking for the ability to have greater vulnerability so that you can increase your intimacy and then use that intimacy to be a ramp or a runway for a higher level of sexual expression. If you're looking for understanding your sexual personality, if you're looking for understanding the differences in dietary requirements for men and women to be potent sexually, and definitely if we're looking for afterplay foods and things that we can do to take the sexual energy and transmute it into productive, positive interaction, because all of our relationships, including our sexuality, are not just for the individual emotional benefit that we've become accustomed to just being obsessed with. You know, you're supposed to take this energy and do something good in the world. And so you're recreating all the time, whether it is mental, emotional, or physical children that you're creating. Sex is procreative, generative ritual that we share. So if these things sound interesting to you and you would love to have an elevated conversation with alike people from all over the world, the Black Love School is it. The semester, The Heat of Love, Understanding the Art and Science of Indigenous Sexuality is for you. So we're inviting you to come out. We just started last night. The class list is out there. You can click the link on this video and join the Black Love School. Get into the classes. You watch the audio visual classes, as Nwasha said. You do the heart work assignments. Then we come together as a group and have a live Q&A where we break down the content of that class and everybody shares their experience, their questions, and it's a riveting, elevated, illuminating experience around sexuality. And so we invite you to come in this semester, get with us, and let's get our love making on. So, as always, we're greeting you in peace and we're asking you, come on in. Come on with us. This is the Black Love School where we live, learn, and love together. So as always, we're greeting you in peace and we're saying,
Miyakoma.
Miyakoma.